Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernshire?
Here.
Okay, there are no minutes for approval or matters of special privilege. That takes us right into public hearings, which there are none, which takes us right into reports, and we'll kick it off with Finance Director. There she is. She's hiding today.
Heidi on you. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. I have a few brief remarks as we report on May and start gearing up for our year end. In the general fund, as of May 31st, revenues are at 87% of budget, or $40,500,000. Expenditures are at 88% of budget, or $40,700,000, with $125,000 drawn from reserves. Real estate taxes collected are at 80% of the budget. Public service real estate taxes have exceeded the budget by about $72,000. Personal property taxes are slightly over budget, while business personal property taxes have exceeded the budget by $92,500. Our business, professional, and occupational license taxes have exceeded the budget by $532,000, of which $350,000 of the increase is due to the contracting category. Lodging taxes are at 79% of budget, with collections for activity in April exceeding last year by 7%, while year-to-date collections exceeded last year by 0.5% at this point. Meals taxes are at 84% of the budget, with collections for activity in April exceeding last year by 2%, and year-to-date collections exceeding last year by 2.8%. Permits have exceeded budget by 218%, or $132,000, primarily due to mechanical permits and, to a lesser extent, electrical, plumbing, elevator, and stormwater permitting. The general fund expenditures are at 87% of budget, with 1 month remaining and several transfers to other funds to be made. I am fairly confident that we were not going to see the large under budget come in largely under budget. A lot of that's just related to some unseen circumstances when budget was developed, as well as inflation's impact on the cost that we have for providing services. In the CIP fund, sales taxes are at 79% of the budget, with 3 more months of revenue to be realized between now and year end. Collection for March activity exceeded last year by 2%, and year-to-date collections are at 4.5% more than last year. In the tourism fund, historic sales tax realizes at 84% of budget, with collections for activity in March exceeding last year by 4%, and year-to-date collections exceeding last year by 7.8%. The $2 room tax is at 82% of budget, with collections for April activity exceeding last year by 18%. However, year-to-date collections exceeds last year by 0.8%. And then in the utility fund, water revenue realized is at 72% of budget, and sewer revenue is at 86% of budget. Expenditures are at 74% of budget, with an operating income of $914,500. That concludes my remarks. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dameron. I don't have any questions. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, no questions. Just thank you to everyone who contributes to staying within the budget with the unknown economy and the rising prices of different things. It's good to see that looks like we're still going to be there.
No questions. Thank you.
No questions for me, and just to add on a little bit to Vice Mayor Dent's comments, I think it's hard too when some figures you have from March, some from April, and just trying to keep track of all of that is admirable, and with the various percentages. So thank you.
Director Dameron, I'll echo the thanks and no questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, takes us now to monthly departmental operating reports.
I think that's also fine.
All right, welcome back.
Back again. While we provide lots of data on our website, we really would like to focus today on our real estate assessment. Our real estate assessor, Derek Green, has become a bit of a techie, and he's providing a wealth of information with the goal of transparency. And so with that, I'd like to invite Derek up to go through his presentation, share what's on our website, and probably some more information from behind the scenes as well.
Welcome, Mr. Green.
Hi. Okay, good afternoon, Mayor Bonds, Vice Mayor Dent, Member of City Council. Thank you for the opportunity today to talk about assessment to sales ratio. There are many reasons why assessment to sales ratios are important or critical to local government. Perhaps the misunderstood critical part of that is this is a very complicated and somewhat scientific process. That is mass appraisal in general. Assessment to sales ratios are guided by state code and by international standards. At its core, they establish the assessed value of your property for ad valorem taxation purposes. The last several city council meetings has certainly been a matter of discussion. We have 6 fun facts that we think you will find interesting. Spoiler alert, the final 2 slides of this presentation will focus on providing the community the next generation data visualization platform, which is Power BI. We believe this dashboard will transform our data for increased transparency and hopefully public engagement. Oops, sorry, Mark. Okay, oops. Okay, today we'll focus primarily on 3 key factors that I believe provide the highest level of clarity and understanding. The first key factor is legal requirements. This is something that's been talked about a few times in the last few sessions. In this section, we will focus on Code of Virginia 58.1.3201 and the Constitution of Virginia, Article 10, Section 2. The second key factor is our primary purpose. And in this section, we will clarify our role for compliance and execution, which is also outlined in Constitution of Virginia, Article 10, Section 1. And third, lastly, we'll focus on transparency. We will talk about why this is important. In our industry, this is essentially everything. Okay. Key factor 1, legal requirements, specifically 58.1.3201 and Article 10, Section 2 of the Virginia Constitution. The Code of Virginia and the Constitution of Virginia can be complex and rather long with language and text. Today we will focus on the critical salient points highlighted and read on the slide with all statutory language or text. As you can see from the red highlighted portion of the codified language on your screen, the Code of Virginia and the Constitution of Virginia are in relative harmony when defining the requirements of assessing real property at fair market value. In fact, the only real difference, if you look at the 2 definitions, is the Code of Virginia references 100%, but they're still referencing its fair market value, which leads me to our first fun fact. There is no statutory definition of fair market value in either the Code of Virginia or the Constitution of Virginia. On your screen, you can see I've put that in a portion under layman's terms. The actual definition was adopted from a series of court cases, most recently Tuckahoe Women's Club versus City of Richmond in 1958. And that is the price at which it would bring when it is offered for sale by one who desires but is not obliged to sell it, and bought by one is under no necessity of having it. That's the actual fair market definition as per the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our second key point is our primary purpose. We look at this as uniform inequity. The Constitution of Virginia, Article 10, Section 1 requires assessments to be uniform and equitable among all classes of property. This dual mandate is critical to ensure that the burden of tax is equally spread amongst all taxpayers. The Code of Virginia requires the tax commissioner to develop those classifications of property. The tax commissioner has developed 6 classes of taxable property, and there's only 1 class of exempt. On our real estate department website, as Barbara mentioned, we publish the 2 most current certified land books, both taxable and exempt, for public review and disclosure. Okay, key factor 3 is transparency. In our case, it's our primary mission. Assessments to sales ratio provide the public with real tangible performance metrics and confidence we are executing our job as required by code. They also provide confidence that our assessments are fair and equitable. We encourage everyone to visit our department website and review all the comprehensive data that we publish, specifically the numerous multi-level stratification assessment sales ratio reports. For those who serve on boards and committees and receive the weekly newsletter, this is something you see that we publish on a monthly schedule. For those who don't sweat it. We publish a ratio study monthly on the city website, the My Sidewalk dashboard from the IT department, and we'll talk about this later on our Power BI dashboard. Okay, one of the other topics I thought was interesting is assessment cycles. You know, being that the greater Williamsburg area, we've got the city of Williamsburg, who is on an annual cycle, and our two neighboring partners, James City County and York County, are on biennial cycles. This just happens to be the year that we both have an assessment date of 1/1 of 2024. I put this up here because I thought this was kind of interesting, that our overall percent increase was 8.83, as you can see on the slide. James City County, again, a assessment date this year of January 1st, just like Williamsburg. They had an 18.5% increase, and York County was a 22.81. I think this is key because if we were on a biannual cycle and we took last year's increase, we'd be very similar to where York County is. So I think the benefit here is that the burden is not put on not on one cycle, right? That you go on a biannual cycle and you're stuck with that value for 2 years. It can be quite a shock. It's, in some cases, we get a lot of calls because a lot of people assume that Williamsburg is the assessing body of York County or James City County, that we, unfortunately we're not, particularly with those increases. So we're glad that ours is a much lower number. But Williamsburg itself operates under City Ordinance 1851 that requires an annual reassessment of property. The City of Williamsburg executes annual assessment under the Code of Virginia 58-1-3251. And why that's important is that is a specific code language that for a population of less than 30,000 residents, it allows City Council to adopt an annual assessment cycle. Effective January 1st, some of you were on City Council at the time, we asked that you change the assessment cycle. We used to be on what I would refer to as a fiscal, that we had a July 1st assessment date and July 1st tax lien date. We changed that to what is called a hybrid schedule, what City Council did, and that means we have a January 1st assessment date, but it's still a July 1st tax lien date. My opinion, it was a common sense approach from City Council because there was an issue back then for the budget process that we were publishing values before a budget tax rate adoption. So made it very challenging. Certainly we don't want to have shock and awe to people's tax bills. We'd rather them be notified and be part of the process. Leads me to the second fun fact is the Code of Virginia does have a provision that allows 4-year cycles for cities if adopted by City Council. I was unaware of that. As it turns out, I asked the state, my fun fact 3, that there are 18 cities that are on an annual cycle. There are 12 that are on a biannual cycle, and surprisingly, there are 8 on a 4-year cycle. But you will find out that those that are on the lengthy cycle is they're staffed by Commissioner of Revenue. They don't have a professional appraisal staff. So generally speaking, they're going to hire out their assessment with a vendor. Okay. In the process, most people probably aren't aware that the Department of Taxation plays a pivotal role in how we assess property, particularly how we report and our measures of performance. So they publish 2 ratio studies annually. The first one is called an Estimated Sales Ratio Study they call the ESRS. And the second one that they do is an Assessment Sales Ratio Study, also known as the ASRS. Everyone loves acronyms, the state's included. So the ESRS measures a point-in-time assessment level. And why that's important is they estimate each locality's assessment as of January 1st using only valid sales. So sales between willing buyer and willing seller, kind of that definition we'll refer back to as fair market value, from the last quarter. Here's where this becomes key, and this can have a significant impact on jurisdictions. The developed ratio is utilized in the valuation of all Public Service Corporation Commission properties in your jurisdiction. So in other words, the ratio that is developed and adopted by the locality, so if my ratio is at 98.5%, that is the highest ratio the state corporation can use in valuing all public utility. From my perspective, these are real dollars in some jurisdictions, can have a serious impact on your budget. And the next slide, we'll talk about we'll show you some published ERS ratios for all 38 independent cities in the Commonwealth. The next study they do is called the ASRS, and this is a comprehensive view of localities' assessment performance. They evaluate the accuracy, uniformity, and accessibility of assessments throughout the Commonwealth. These findings assist in this is where they develop the school funding formula and legislative initiatives. Turns out, I didn't know this either, there are 133 taxing jurisdictions in the Commonwealth. I come from Ohio, there's 88, so that's quite a big difference for me. It's kind of surprising. Okay, slide 8. So this is the first slide that's referring to the estimated sales ratio study from the state. This is what they published for calendar year 2023. As you can see, the City of Williamsburg ratio is at 98.2% highlighted on that slide. Another way to interpret this is that our assessment levels are 1.8% below 100% or fair market value. Next slide is the prior year. This is 2022, the assessment ratio study from the Commonwealth. We're at 99%. So again, another way to interpret this is our values are 1% off fair market, 100% or fair market value that's mandated by code. This leads into my next fun fact. This is sort of an interesting one. We had the highest level of assessment for any locality that is on an annual or biannual cycle for calendar year 2022. This is a big deal for us. Sounds a little corny, but assessors are very competitive. So this is a quasi-report card that gets put out there, and it can be plenty juicy at conference. Okay, so at the end of the day, we talk about these standards, we talk about using sales. So when we use these sales, these are the statistics using these sales and us equalizing the values to match those sales. So IAAO, or the International Association of Assessing Officers, is who sets the standards for ratio studies, not the Department of Taxation. Standards focus on the need for local assessors and serve as guidelines for oversight agencies that use ratio studies for equalization and tax appraisal, tax assessment performance, such as the Department of Taxation. In Williamsburg, I thought this was kind of important because we have such a unique community that the PRD, to me, plays a critical role due to our lack of homogeneous neighborhoods and disparity of values within many of our neighborhoods. This is a challenge. This measure of what they call it vertical equity provides a central balance basically on those lower tiered and upper tiered properties in the same neighborhood. If you look at the screen under the PRD, we're showing a 1. 1 is perfect. What that really is, all it's saying is we've equally assessed lower valued properties and higher valued properties the same. To me, that's a real badge of honor just to make sure. Obviously, the Commonwealth of Virginia has adopted a median as their measure of performance, but to me, the PRD in this type of jurisdiction with these varying of values, that is, to me, has equal weight. So, fun fact 6, as I mentioned, the Virginia Department of Taxation has adopted the median as their primary source. Where I'm from in Ohio, they actually adopted the weighted mean, so it was kind of interesting that flip. I kind of like the median because it makes more sense. It deals with those outliers a little bit better and not so much a weighted average. So at the end of the slide, you ask yourself, how are we looking, as they say? Well, if you look at the slide, our report card from the state should say around 98.5%. So that means after we've done a general reassessment this year, our values are in line with the sales, about 1.5% off. So it gets to the point that Barb was talking about, the fun stuff, as I call it. The next generation of reporting. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Power BI. Power BI, this definition from Microsoft, is an interactive data visualization software product developed by Microsoft with its primary focus of business intelligence. The slide has the embedded URL to our site, highlighted in light blue. It should be noted that our landing page does provide instructions on how to use the application. So we're not just posting something out there and saying, good luck. Caroline has, I think, taken some due diligence to make sure that they're pretty simple and easy to understand. I would also add the significant effort was placed to make sure the language that we used was common language and not catered to assessment personnel or realtors or brokers. We're hoping that the common person could look at this dashboard and say, oh, this is great, this makes sense. I would recommend when you use the Power BI dashboard to look at it in full screen mode because it sort of like immerses yourself in the experience. When it's in not a full screen mode, it can be somewhat hard to see because there's a lot of active tiles that are playing on the screen itself. Power BI provides, in my opinion, our community a plethora of information all in one dashboard. That's a cool part. You can see so much data on one screen, and it just tells a fantastic story. This includes, for those that have followed along the process, sales in every neighborhood in our jurisdiction, monthly performance measures, so those that are included in that letter that people get in the newsletter, you got the performance measures, all the sales. Live maps, because this has Esri GIS maps embedded right into the Power BI, and many other different levels of stratification. I believe there's like 10 pages that you can scroll through. I think one of the other key advantages too, this is paperless and updates nightly. So this is linked to our CAMA software, our assessment software. It's linked to the server. It updates every night at midnight. I don't have to do anything. We just need to rely on Caroline to be keying in these transfers when they get recorded from the clerk's office. And at 12:13 a.m., that's a weird time, it seems like it updates, you will see all the new changes. And it'll actually refresh all the statistics so you can follow along the assessment process, which I think is kind of cool. Another thing I would add, that we believe this transparency provides a user to follow that process, and you can see the real impact, of what sales, whoops, sorry about that, Mark. Okay, sorry. You see the real impact of how the sales may or not impact your property or your neighborhood. You can see it in real time. Like I said, every night at midnight, it refreshes, so we get all new statistics as well. We also publish another dashboard. This is all just more service related, is the land book in a more digital format. If you go to our website, you will be able to see the land book that I signed for FY24. That's a 762-page document. That's pretty dry stuff. The dashboard itself is one page. It summarizes everything by those class codes mandated by the Department of Taxation all on one screen. And I'll leave you with this, with the next generation reporting. If you look at the website, this Power BI dashboard, you can extract from the dashboard right now, you will see a pattern that suggests our values are nearly now 2% per month. So I just looked at this morning after it updated last night because we keyed in the series of June sales. And you can see January, February, March, April, May, and June. And you can see each month, for the most part, we're losing about 2% spread. The values are selling 2% higher than our assessed values that we just certified January 1. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of see what's going on in your neighborhood. I'm not saying it's an opportunity to prepare you for what's coming because it would be premature. We've got 6 more months that we're going to have to be using that process as well. But lastly, this is what Power BI, the dashboard, looks like on our assessment website. And it's designed to show you the top, that it gives you everything that's in that newsletter that you see, which includes all those ratio standards from the IAAO and the Commonwealth of Virginia. You got live maps, so if you filter on any neighborhood or you want to look at your neighborhood or your neighbor's neighborhood, however you want to do it, that map will zoom to those sales that are targeted in the date range. And as well, that right column there is the average sales by month. That's where it's actually providing you the performance measures of how our values are holding up to the marketplace. And that's all I have.
Well, great. So fun fact number 7 is I think Williamsburg has probably the best assessor in all of the Commonwealth. Mr. Green, you're a great combination of techie, enthusiast for what it is that you do, with great personality, which I think helps you when you go to meet with anybody who wants to talk about their assessment. And I've talked to people routinely, and they say, well, my assessment went up, whatever. And I said, well, sit down and talk with Derek. And they always come out of that meeting feeling maybe not happy that their tax bill went up, but at least they don't have an argument that it went up too much because it's based on data. Yeah. And I think the work that you've done to implement this new technology has been outstanding. But beyond that, you're out in the field and you're measuring houses and you're talking to businesses and multifamily properties, and you're out there doing all the work that you need to make sure that you're within or you're pretty close to what the state code requires. And I think that's something that often is forgot, is that the state code requires us to be assess at 100% of valuation. And so all the work that you've done and demonstrated here, I think, goes to show that we're right there, and 99% is pretty good.
Yeah.
So I don't have any questions. I just wanted to offer that thought. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Derek, for the presentation, and to the mayor's point, that's probably, I know for me, probably one of the questions I get the most, and confusing about assessments is, there's some people that think either you or city council just decide we're gonna raise assessments, and so explaining what the state code requires, and I know other localities who had much bigger increases have been going through this as well, but it's helpful to help the citizens understand it, to help us understand it, how the assessment process works. It's not just someone inflating the numbers so we have more money in the budget. So I would say that's probably the most frequent question that I receive about assessment. So I think this is timely to clarify it. Thank you.
And yes, I don't have any questions either. I might be embarrassed to ask them in front of everybody if I did, because this has been very informative to me, and I really do appreciate it. And I think, in addition to what was said about clearly your expertise and your passion for what you do, which definitely comes through, and now I'm more excited than I've ever been before about this. But
Mission accomplished.
yeah, exactly. But in all seriousness, I think that the commitment to transparency in terms of making sure that people understand that it isn't opaque, it isn't a mystery, because this is something that can feel, just as a taxpayer, it can feel very hard to parse through, and how did this really happen? So I just really want to touch on the commitment to both having this ability to go and have questions answered from your home, going online, but also, your commitment into meeting with people when they want to sit down and talk through their individual situation or questions they have. So I think that, we are so fortunate to have you here and putting your expertise to work for the people of Williamsburg. So thank you.
And I would just like to say thanks to Derek. Knows I'm a little bit of a tax map nerd myself.
I had you in mind when I was doing this.
And so I'm just really glad that we have you in this position. And I think that, as the Vice Mayor said, not only do you tell people, do we tell people, but it just constantly needs to be repeated that this is due to state code, and it's not something we dream up. And a lot of times I don't think people realize that part of the reason an assessment goes up is because of what their neighbor sells their house for or sells their property for. And everyone looks at that equity they have and obviously want to get the most from it. And when they do, then that impacts all of us in a neighborhood or community. So hopefully this information will again reinforce what we've been telling people. So thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Derek,
And I'll be calling you with questions when
Sure.
I get on here, I'm sure.
And I'll echo all the congratulations and appreciation. I'm over here clicking in Power BI, which I've always known as a more internal-facing tool for data visualization, not one that's externally facing, but this truly is with the landing page and just with the amount of data you're able to parse through, easily discernible for someone like me who's not in it all the time. And it's especially cool just looking at different months here to get to see what I know is a cyclical nature of home sales and the fact that there's been more and more recent months as we get into warmer months. So it's unique and probably first in class as far as state standards to have something like this, which is so transparent as far as how we do the assessments for residences in Williamsburg. So thanks for obviously going to the trouble, as was mentioned, of meeting with anyone that wants to talk with you, but also making sure that we have as much information out there for public consumption as possible. Really happy to have you in the position. So for all the work you do, Derek.
Mayor, if I might, just for a second,
Yes,
I'll
sir.
pile on to the congratulations and just point out that Mr. Rogers brings up a good point. We do use this internally. There are a number of departments using this to query all kinds of information, and it's given us a really much deeper insight to the relationship between the real estate parcel record and economic development and planning. So much so that Derek has been invited to speak on our use of this data in those ways at numerous conferences in the profession.
There you go. First in class.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Green. Appreciate all your efforts. Okay, next on the agenda is City Manager's report.
None today.
Okay. Anything from our attorney?
No.
Takes us now to open forum. I do have several speakers card. First, I have John Kraffel. Welcome, sir. If you just state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Kraffel. My address is 106 Robert Cole Court. I'm here representing the Williamsburg Symphony Orchestra and the advocates for a live performance venue. We are a newly established corporation at ALPV, and we would like to speak about not only though the LPV that we're considering, but also the sports center. We want the city to know that we intend to do our part to make this entire vision a reality. Of course, our contribution will be related to the performance venue, but we see ourselves as part of the larger effort. The reason is that the entire package has something for all of us, and we see ourselves as participating in something that is an entire package for the city, where it has something for everybody. There's something for our youth, there's something for our taxpayers, there's something for our sports lovers, there's something for our music lovers, and there's something for other arts lovers. It's really a complete package that the city is working on, and that's what we see ourselves as being a part of. This package is built on what is already our signal community strength, which is our tourism industry. And in doing so, we provide tourists additional reasons to come here, thus expanding our tax base. The entire package also serves the citizens of our community directly, providing facilities for which there is long-standing great need, and facilities that will expand the range of possible experiences for residents of our city in the athletics and in the performing arts. We thank the city for their extraordinary vision and look forward to helping make it a reality. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I have two speakers cards here for Mr. Wilson, if you would like to come forward and speak to both of these. Welcome.
First one was the open forum, the second one was the water piece.
Yeah, well, that's not a public hearing, so this is be the time to, the water conversation is not a public hearing, so there isn't an opportunity to speak on that except for now.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Robert Wilson, again, 22 The Palisades. As the council is aware, there is no currently study of the city's water supply has been done in adjoining jurisdictions. As a result, I've researched the issue and provided you in the city with a water supply study in April, which I updated and provided you in the city last week. The city has declined to include it as part of the public record as suggested. The action today to defer payment of $12.5 million for a year because the city failed to do the forethought and planning necessary. I hope that we can negotiate a lower fee or increase in the supply over the 1 million gallons per day that it controls. Perhaps we can locate another source of supply. The other disclosure failure here affects the safety and welfare of our citizens, students at William Mary, and visitors. Also disclosed in my report, Newport News Water Works tested its water supply and found unaccepted levels of PFOS, a class of PFAS contaminants that the EPA has announced it will begin to regulate. If the city purchases raw water from Newport News, it will expose us to that contaminant unless expensive modifications are made to our treatment facilities. The city may decide to purchase more expensive treatment water from Newport News once they have implemented a solution to treat and remove this contaminant. In the meantime, any water purchased from Newport News will have acceptably high levels of this contaminant. You know, it was likely that based on the growth in the city will lose its self-sufficiency in its water supply at peak summer demand within the next couple of years. That may be optimistic, and that the water demand last month reached an all-time high for the month of May. If this trend continues into this summer, peak water demand months of July and August, we may need to access Newport News water supply as early as this summer. On the issue of the school separation proposal, as the council was aware, submitted to you and the city a report summarizing my review of the feasibility study into the separation of our school system from the joint system we've had with JCC for the past 70 years. Further, I extended my understanding by doing further research, but I've been advised of the city attorney that we will not make it a part of the public record. The study did demonstrate the value of the disaggregation of the data. In this case, it revealed differences in demographics and performance within the Williamsburg student population. It suggests that the current approach should be modified by targeting programs for these 100 or so students that are enrolled primarily within the elementary and middle schools within the city limits. The proposal to separate the school systems comes with some immense disadvantages. The first is the loss of learning among the majority of students as a result of the disruption caused by the change. The proposal would either move all elementary school students to Matthew Whaley, causing excessive crowding until physical facilities are upgraded, or all grade 5 and 6 students would be relocated to Berkeley Middle School. All students in both Williamsburg and JCC would be moved out of the James Blair Middle School, and this would be converted into a high school without the adequate athletic facilities that a high school requires. All the city's high school students would be relocated out of the current 3 high schools and moved to James Blair. Further, there's no provision in the current schools agreement for how teachers and staff will be handled. They currently work for the combined system. Who goes where? There are currently no high school in the city, so current teachers teaching at the high school level would likely stay at their current school unless released by James City County. There will only be 350 high school students in the system. This will negatively impact the availability of classes they currently enjoy, the availability of extracurricular activities, and athletic competitiveness simply due to the small number of students. Athletically, the teams will compete in the smallest division in the state, typically traveling to rural destinations. If the city uses as its pretext the underserving of the special needs students, it should be noted the study suggests that the city will be ill-prepared to do so, and it would be at an unacceptably high price. Their solution, outsource the education of special needs students to James City County, as if they would now agree. Finally, the financial implications are a mess. The city's done no financial analysis of any proposed separation that is shared with residents. The feasibility study projects a base budget with annual increased spending of $2.4 million, or an increase of over 12%. This alone would translate into an 8-cent increase in the real estate tax rate. And this deficit does not include required food service staff and facilities to provide federally required meals to over 590 students who qualify. A decision to pursue separation of the school system would lead to a loss of learning outcomes for the majority of our students and negative financial consequences to the city and increased taxes on our residents. Alternatively, we can invest in targeted programs for those students who are currently underperformed and raise them up to the level of the other students. As my study represents the most exhaustive look and feedback regarding the school interest, in conclusion, I am surprised the city has declined to include it as part of the public record. Undoubtedly, it clashes with the desire to pursue a separation of the school systems. You, the City Council, have asked for feedback from the community, but when it's provided to you, you seem to neglect disseminating it. Citizens may ask themselves, why bother? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker's card I have is Lori Wheel. Welcome.
Laurie Wheel, 412 Harriet Tubman Drive. Thank you for having me. So I'm here to address some joys and concerns around the African American Heritage Trail. The joys are on the personal level. I have had a personal and professional interest and involvement in the history and legacy of the local African American population for the past 30 years. In 1990s, I taught at DJ Montague, which was one of the schools built in honor of DJ Montague, who was the principal, much esteemed principal of Bruton Heights School until it closed. Through that school, I made through serving, teaching at DJ Montague, its elementary school, I made wonderful connections with teachers from Bruton Heights. They were still around. Many were very aged. And I became involved with them. Madeline G. and Justina Fallen, to mention two people. Marvelous women. Madeline G. had nowhere to, she was very aged at the time. She was the home ec teacher. She had nowhere, nothing, no one to give very important pieces of memorabilia from Bruton Heights, and she gave me yearbooks, 2 yearbooks. Well, what was I going to do with them? So they are now at the Bruton Heights lobby visitor center there. Very, very interesting if you haven't been there. And then I was employed by CW as an historic interpreter, and I was just so happy to be there when they really got into their African American. Just beautiful, just an amazing thing, made me very happy and proud to be part of it. And then in those 30 years, we moved to Crispus Attucks, Harriet Tubman Drive, also much pleasing to me because of those names, of course, the history, but also I knew that there were very important African-American families living on that street, and it would just be an honor to be part of them. It is my great disappointment I did not conduct oral histories with some of those lovely older people who are now gone, but I am happy to say that I did learn that Quo Vadis Wright, one of wonderful, wonderful woman on that street. I have visited her Wayman Mary collection of papers, so it's out there. I didn't do my part, but maybe I will. Maybe I can put this together to my story, because I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. As far as the concerns, it's more on a neighborhood level. I've spoken to 4 out of 5 neighbors whose homes abut the first leg of the proposed trail through what is now vegetation. They're surprised at not having been informed of this proposal. Will they have input? Is there to be a hearing? What exactly is being proposed? They've heard mention of benches, public restroom, trail lighting, but no specifics. We are concerned about security and privacy. For instance, will the trail and restrooms be open at night? It's important that the city inform each property owner whose backyard will now be next to, if not almost abutting, the trail, just given the terrain back there. So it's important that city inform each property owner, about the trail, public gathering places, what's proposed, and what are the arrangements for maintenance, privacy, and security. We'd also like to understand the planning. What is the purpose of the trail at this point, starting where it does, right on Lafayette Street, right behind Terry Morgan's house, and then having it wind behind this pretty crazy terrain back there, behind next to private residences. For example, would not the Baptist Church, first organized in 1776, be a better choice to begin the trail using existing parking sidewalks landmarks rather than cutting a path through vegetation through our neighborhood? In summary, can you let the property owners know who will be impacted by this proposed trail, what the specifics are, and welcome our feedback? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wheel. So I don't have any other speakers cards, but the open forum is still available for anybody who'd like to come forward. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the open forum and we'll move to unfinished business. First is consideration and action regarding resolution number 24-11, approving the sports agreement and continuing disclosure agreement and the primary official statement associated with the pending HTRFA debt issuance for the construction of the regional center.
Thank you, Mayor. What I'd like to do is ask Jimmy Sanderson from Davenport to come forward and speak to this item.
Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Jimmy Sanderson from Davenport, financial advisor to the city. Maybe just give you a little brief update on where we stand in the process would be helpful. We have rating meetings scheduled for later in June. Our intent to go to Moody's and S&P with the expectation to price our bonds late July with a closing in early August is the current plan. The Historic Triangle Authority met yesterday. They approved their resolution authorizing the issuance of the bonds. Obviously, that is subject somewhat to your consideration today as well. The resolution before you, as Mayor Pons pointed out, really speaks to the plan of finance that we have, in particular the funding of the bonds, which is expected to be paid pursuant to the funding agreement that the city is a part of, as well as James City County and York County. The principal agreement that you're looking at is we call a support agreement. The support agreement is really what the rating agents are going to look at for the credit behind this debt and allow us to borrow it at much lower rates than we would otherwise. But again, the funding will be pursuant to the funding agreement. What Williamsburg is agreeing to above that is if those revenues are ever short, that we would make up the difference in any debt service shortfall. Pretty standard, but again, the rating agencies are going to look to that. We'll be able to report back to you probably 2 weeks or so after our meeting with the rating agencies to give you some guidance on where they came out on this debt in particular. The rest of the resolution approves the forms of documents in substantially final form. There's still some edits that we need to make to the offering document, and also approves the continuing disclosure agreement, which is the city's obligation to file your audit on an annual basis. You already have that obligation under some other debt that you have, so there's no additional obligation on the city beyond what you currently do. Other than that, I think it authorizes, again, the mayor, the city manager, et cetera, to move forward with this structure and coordinating with the authority.
Good. Well, I know you've spent a lot of time on helping the city and the HTRFA put together this package. So this is not the city of Williamsburg going out to borrow this money. This is our obligating to pay the debt that pay for the payments essentially for what the HTRFA is going to take on as debt.
That's correct. HTRFA is issuing the debt. Our obligation is pursuant to the support agreement and the funding agreement that you have with York County's obligation, James City County's obligation as well. There is, I believe, even a statement in here. It's paragraph 7 on page 3, and making it clear this is not a debt or pledge of the full faith and credit of the city of Williamsburg, but it's what we call a moral obligation if there is ever a shortfall.
Sure. And maybe you can help explain a little bit about how the city has set aside those funds using the Historic Triangle Tourism Tax.
Yeah, thank you. So the revenues that are going to be available, which you're obligated to send over to the authority already, is the additional 1% sales tax that we currently collect. Again, James City County and York County do that as well. Those revenues are what we've packaged and structured the debt around to make sure that's sufficient to pay that debt service going forward.
Vice Mayor, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Just a couple of questions. So the way this is structured, really the only thing that's unique from any other bond is that this is the authority that's issuing the bonds, not the city itself. With these support documents, does that have any impact on the city's rating?
The rating agencies will look at this, and that's why we're going to go have a conversation with them. Again, our goal with them is to make sure they understand that we have a stream of revenues that are identified to pay this and are sufficient to pay this annual debt service. It's similar to when we do utility bonds, where your revenues of utility oftentimes are there to pay that debt service. But if we want to get a better rating, local governments will also put their backing behind that as well. And so you've got a stream of revenues, so sort of like we call it self-supporting debt. And that's the way we're going to present this, and we view it as a self-supporting revenue stream that's going to pay that debt service.
And then the language that says we're authorizing the mayor and the city manager, that's language that's consistent with any bond?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Many of my questions actually have already been answered, but I think if folks look through this, they see like, oh, there's some blanks and there's some, you kind of mentioned that there's still some, wordsmithing perhaps to do and things to fill in. So I just kind of wondered if you could give me a sense of what is the evolution of this next? I know you said you were going, to talk to the credit agencies. Like, when I see blanks and things, when do these get filled in?
Right.
At what stage in the process?
Yeah, good question. So the official statement, there's lots of stuff in there, and I would say that none of the blanks are really material to the credit. A lot of stuff has to go into it. There's a process that we go through. There's lots of review that will be done by the lawyers and staff, and so this is, again, I would describe it as substantially complete document. It just got to have some numbers filled in. That's pretty typical. We will have a lot of it completed before we go to see the rating agencies at the end of the month. But there will absolutely be additional review after that between the meeting with the rating agencies and then our pricing in late July. Lawyers will be looking at it very carefully to fill in, make sure those blanks are filled in, and then anything that they may consider material in particular, will be added to the document.
Got it. Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Just like with Ms. Karen Shear, many of the questions that I had and comments have been addressed. So thank you for providing your expertise and professionalism to help us get through this as you have in the past. So just a couple things. One, Stacy asked about the blanks in the narrative. And there's a lot of information in there which to a non-bond person would seem, well, why do we need to tell them all this stuff?
Right.
Can you give a little explanation of why it's so important to tell the rating agencies, I guess, about who we are and what the city is and things like that?
And there's really two audiences that write. So there is the rating agencies, and we have separate presentations that we do to the rating agencies as well. Oftentimes there's confidential information we share with the rating agencies that just so they know what's going on in the city, that they keep confidential as well. And then there is the investor, the ultimate investors. And so the official statements, I'd like to think that investors read all of it. I highly doubt it. But it's there for their reading. And some of the buyers are people that may be unfamiliar with Williamsburg. Hard to believe, but maybe. And so we try to tell the story of Williamsburg. So there's a lot of history on who you are and what you do. And then there's some just hard, cold numbers that they're going to want to see. We attach the audited financial statements that we have are attached to that official statement. And then in addition to that, there's a website out there. It's called EMMA. I don't even know what it stands for, but EMMA is put together by the MSRB, the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. And anybody that issues debt in the public market, as Williamsburg has in the past, puts your audits there on an annual basis. And we upload our audits there. Barbara probably does that for the city. And so there are a number of places where investors will go, but the main one is the preliminary offering statement that you have, that they will understand the city and then make a determination whether to buy the bonds or not. So our goal is to have anything that would be material to an investor's decision to purchase bonds, we'll make sure is in that document. And then there's some other things that maybe are not material, but helpful to understand who Williamsburg is and what you do.
Well, as we've often said, we're very special and unique, and we don't have any peers out there, so it probably is very helpful to keep spreading that word. And then I also just wanted to reinforce that what is included in here is nothing different than the financial plan that we previously approved.
That's correct, yes, ma'am. Same thing we've talked about a number of times at the board council retreat as well. Went through it in great detail. Same plan. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks, as always, Mr. Sanderson, for your advice. I think my question was just sort of jumping off that last point as far as what has not changed, but I know one perception of something that's changed is an idea of bond borrowing 65 million, which is now listed at 70 million. Can you help the public understand why there could be a change there in the number, whereas the facility has not changed at all in the expected capital cost?
That's correct. The pricing has not changed. When we sell bonds in the public markets, they can be sold at a premium, at par, or at a discount. And so what I'm protecting against by allowing us to borrow up to $70 million is to produce a project fund of $65 million. So if the best pricing for the city is to price bonds at a slight discount, so every dollar you issue, you may get 95 cents, but overall your cost of funds is lower, then I want to be able to do that with an investor. And so those are called discount bonds. And so you've got to issue maybe a little bit more par amount to generate enough revenue to fund your project fund, but your overall debt service would be lower. So we wouldn't do that unless it made sense. And so we oftentimes we'll take whatever number we need, say it's $65 million, and we'll add 5-10% cushion to the approval that the governing body does, so that when we price bonds, if it makes sense to do it at a discount, then we have that ability, and it'll cost the city less money to fund it that way.
Okay, so project fund's still the same at 65, but the leeway for bond pricing strategy, that's why there's an increase to 70.
That's right. So we've had transactions where, again, say we need $65 million. Right now, I will tell you that the current structure would be that we issue less than 65 million par amount of bonds. That's because the current market we're looking at as with premium bonds. So for every dollar par amount of bonds, you get $1.10. But again, I want to protect. We've got another month plus before we actually go to the market, so I want to protect against that market changing a little bit. And so that's why it's there. But thank you for that question.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments? Someone like to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
So I move that City Council adopt Resolution 24-11 as drafted.
Is there a second?
Second?
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons? Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kershire?
Aye.
Okay, takes us now to new business, and first is consideration and action regarding proposed resolution 24-09, amending the budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. Ms. Dameron.
Good afternoon. Proposed Resolution 2409 seeks to do a couple of things to adjust our upcoming budget for fiscal year '25. The first is when we set the PPTR rate for the fiscal '25 year, the information was not available at the time of the budget to calculate the percentage that was needed to give back to the taxpayer the amount of funds that we received from the state. So we passed a budget with the 35%. The actual percent that we need to have to give back the funds is 30%, so we're asking to adjust that. In addition, the budget did not accurately reflect the Social Service Advisory Board's recommendation for some of our outside agencies. We're seeking to correct that, as well as a typo in the amount of funding to the Tidewater Arts Outreach. And so we would request that we get the budget adopted or amended to reflect the rate and these adjustments.
Questions?
No questions, thank you.
Seems like housekeeping to me.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dameron. Motion?
I move that City Council approve Resolution 24-09 consistent with the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kershire?
Aye.
Okay, next is consideration and action regarding proposed resolution 24-10, amending the budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. You could be here all
Thank
day,
you.
Ms. Dameron.
And we're seeking now to amend the budget for some grants. We received $12,644 from the Department of Elections. The Brian Justice Assistant Grant, which is a police grant, for $3,178. The Williamsburg Volunteer Fire Department donation of $1,276, and a private donation to the police for $1,000. And we're also requesting to appropriate some additional revenues, specifically from our professional, business professional occupational license, also one for a FEMA Safer grant, where we've received more than originally was included in the budget, and then our public service, real property, mechanical permits, and bank stock taxes.
Questions?
No.
No.
Motion for this?
So I move that City Council approve Resolution 24-10 as consistent with the staff recommendation.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kershire?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is consideration and action regarding proposed ordinance 24-7 to add Division 7, Chapter 2, Article 3 of the Williamsburg City Code to create the Williamsburg Farmers Market Advisory Board. Ms. Shelton.
It's actually me, Mayor. This is a final step in the transition for the farmers market into the city's Parks and Recreation Department. And what this does is, in June, you all know, we're going to do it later today, is appoint a whole host of folks to boards and commissions that are expiring. This establishes a new board and commission that would be the new Farmers Market Advisory Board. It's not that dissimilar from what was there. It allows for 5 members, 3 members are known, an appointment from Cologne Winsberg, an appointment from the Merchant Square Association, and an appointment to represent the vendors, and then 2 sort of at-large appointments from the community, which we'll be advertising later this month, and hopefully bring back some good nominations for you all to consider appointing to this board. The terms will be for 4 years, with the exception of those 2 citizen members, which we'll appoint for 2 years, and that's just to create a staggered appointment process so that the whole board doesn't turn over at the same time due to term limits. And that's really the action that's before you.
Just for, I guess, awareness, the existing board has voted in approval of taking this action, right?
That's right.
This isn't a shock to anybody.
No, shouldn't be.
Okay. Any questions for the city manager?
No questions.
Just a question for those who tuning in or into this issue. Will the public see any difference in terms of this shift, sort of behind the scenes from the way things have been to this becoming into the Parks and Rec Department?
Sure. Let me just back up and tell the story a little bit. So a few months ago, the Farmers Market Board submitted to us revised bylaws, which they're required to do by their existing bylaws, and that caused us to sit down and talk about the farmers market and its current status and what it could be and should be. And what we realized is it really is probably time for us to talk about transitioning it back into the city fold, which would give it a greater level of support, particularly for the staff perspective. They've always been housed with Parks and Recreation until the fire, and then they were temporarily somewhere else, which sort of brought this back to the surface of them being part of the city family in a way that is more meaningful. So we began the process of identifying how that would work. The city attorney and I looked at what was required. We sent out notice to the vendors. We sent out notice to the board members. We sent out notice to some of the people that have been involved in the market, just to let them know this was a process underway, and then put before the board a resolution of support for the transition, and it was approved, I believe, unanimously, with the full support of the staff, of course. And so the transition really has already occurred, and this is just the step of creating the advisory board, which isn't required, but certainly something that we wanted to do, because the whole intent of this is to keep the farmers market just as it is and protect its mission, but also give it the ability to continue to grow in the way that we think it should.
Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. And I think one thing that's sort of crucial to me in the agenda item summary was saying that when the farmers market was created, that localities did not have the authority to operate farmers markets. So if we had had the authority to operate them 20 years ago, it probably would have started out being under the city anyway.
It's very possible. I mean, if you look around the state right now, most farmers markets are a component of Parks and Recreation departments for the locality that they're in.
And I was a volunteer when the current farmers market manager started, and I can attest to the fact that she is very dedicated, passionate, and has done a lot of growth for the farmers market. And I think we're renowned for the type of farmers market that we have and the people that are attracted to it. So additional resources that can be allocated to her and her staff, I'm fully in support of.
I think that was well said. I have no additional questions.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? Somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council adopt proposed ordinance 24-07.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
All right, item D is consideration and action regarding the extension of the project development agreement for a long-term water supply between the City of Newport News and the City of Williamsburg to June 30th, 2025. I'm sorry.
Sir.
Mr. Reed.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. As you're aware, the city has a long-term water deal with the City of Newport News. We signed the agreement in 2009, and it's a 50-year contract that allows the city to purchase up to 2 million gallons per day. The initial portion of the agreement allows for the purchase of 2 million gallons per day, and that portion of the agreement was set to end June 30, 2024. We met with Newport News to extend the current agreement. This will give us time to better evaluate cost, other options, as well as have the utility master plan get to its conclusion and understand, what our CIP items will be in the future. We are here asking council to authorize the city manager to execute this extension, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So you had mentioned that the city and city council back in 2009 recognized that there may be a day that we need a backup source of water supply.
Yes, sir.
And so in that, they signed an agreement for 50 years and required us to go through this process by the June 30th of 2024.
Yes,
sir. In that, because there was a comment earlier talking about water from Newport News, we can purchase treated or untreated water, correct?
correct.
So if we purchase treated water, it wouldn't have all the contaminants, or the level of contaminants would have been tested and ensured that it qualified.
Whatever they sent out would have to meet regulatory standards, so the PFAS would have to be removed.
Okay. Is there a cost to this extension?
There is a cost to the extension. It was $12.5 million originally, and due to inflation and CPI increases, it would be upwards of $18 million.
Yeah, that's if we sign the
extension. Yes, sir.
Is there a cost to the one-year extension?
There is no cost with the one-year extension.
And so I think it was a month or 2 months ago, you were before us and you talked about the need to do a study on the water treatment plant, the infrastructure there, and to help us understand better what the needs are. Is that?
Yes, sir. And included in all of this is our utility system as a whole, our safe yield from the reservoir, other options as far as when we have a drought, other options as far as other sources of water. We're looking at a lot of different things. And again, this just helps us, give us a little more time to fully evaluate that.
Before this one-year extension comes due, we'll have the results of that study.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Yeah, I agree. I think this is prudent that you have time to evaluate the overall water system before we enter into another agreement. And obviously, there's been some concerns raised that you have the opportunity to assess before we make another long-term commitment. So I think it's prudent that we just do the one-year extension.
Thank you. Thank you for this. So we are currently, under the contract, paying for access to the water supply.
Correct.
Have we ever actually used it?
We have some years back for testing purposes, but never needed it for capacity issues.
I see. Okay. So, I mean, I agree. I think that pressing pause and having this year-long extension to get questions answered, to sort of reevaluate what was looked at and considered in 2009, and given that we are looking at the water, you're doing these infrastructure, studies, I think before we enter into something even more expensive, it sounds like the cost has risen, we absolutely should sort of take a minute and see what may be best going forward. So I appreciate this idea to ask for the extension, and I think it makes good sense, so thank you.
Ramsey?
Yeah, I agree with the concept that it makes good sense to have the extension, particularly since there's no charge to the city, and obviously Newport News is cooperating in that degree. In terms of the utility master plan and everything related to the water treatment and all of this, is this something that's being done by the staff, or are you getting outside expertise involved?
We went with the firm Kimley Horn, and they're performing the study for us.
So we do have an outside firm that is doing the study for us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I think we're all familiar with Kimberly Horn. They've done a number of other studies for the city. So, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Director Reed. I too am in favor of the extension. It just makes sense from a bargaining standpoint and not being time constrained, especially with, as you mentioned, the about 50% increase in cost from inflation. My questions are around water quality. I know we're very proud in Williamsburg of a highly rated water quality. And so I was hoping you might be able to speak towards what that means to receive commendations of our water quality, especially as it relates to particulate matter. Newport News, I know, was discussed in the public conversation nowadays more PFAS. So can you address how Williamsburg goes about treating its water quality and rating it, and on what scale we are rated comparative to other localities?
Sure. I guess first, PFAS is a large issue mainly around military bases. And just to, I guess, alleviate those concerns, we've not found dangerous levels in our water, in our reservoir, or our finished water, which is what we call the treated water when it leaves the plant. The primary award that the city gets is, they call it turbidity, but it's the amount of particles that are in the water. And the standard for that is 0.3, and we generally stay under a 0.1, which is about as optimized a treatment system as you can have. And the city's won that award multiple times over. So our water quality is outstanding.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. And I know that report, too, is always online. Every year I get to talk to Sierra Club about sustainability, but also environmentalism in the city, and that's one topic I get to speak on. So I think we go back several years talking about what that water quality report says about our particulate matter and safety of the water here.
Yes, sir.
And one thing I would say to that is another opportunity to brag. The treatment plant is old, and we've not made a tremendous amount of improvements in its equipment and hardware and software. So the credit for that award every year really does go to the staff that are dedicated to making sure that that's the case.
Just hope we open it back up for tours.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Reed. Somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute an amendment of project development agreement for long-term water supply between the City of Newport News and the City of Williamsburg to change the due date for the second payment from June 30th, 2024 to June 30th, 2025.
Second.
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Good, thanks, sir. Next is consideration and action on proposed ordinance 24-06, creating a designated outdoor refreshment area in the Merchant Square, and to request an increase of frequency and duration pursuant to section 4.1-206-3 of the Code of Virginia. Ms. Matsumoto.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons and members of City Council. Thank you so much for allowing me time today to talk about designated outdoor refreshment areas. So in 2021, the Commonwealth adopted HB 2266, which allows for local governments to create by ordinance up to 3 designated outdoor refreshment areas, which allow for the outdoor consumption of alcohol within a designated area. When the bill was passed, several members of our business community downtown came together with some Colonial Williamsburg staff to request from the Economic Development Department that we explore this as an opportunity for Merchant Square. ABC requires that included in the ordinance passed by City Council must be an official safety plan. Oops, this is actually a different slide. We're all good. Okay. The ABC requires that included with the ordinance passed by City Council has to be an official safety plan approved by the locality's chief of police. We did some research and collected safety plans from across the Commonwealth, but most of those were built for the original purpose of HB 2266, which was to allow localities to have up to 16 events per year. We knew that that wasn't going to work for us because our intent was to create this as a year-round, everyday, Monday to Sunday lifestyle enhancement for downtown. So we explored several different options. We met, myself, Assistant City Manager DeWitt, and City Attorney Shelton met with ABC's legal team, who notified us that they'd be comfortable with that expansion to year-round as a benefit, as long as our police chief was comfortable with the safety plan and the oversight for the DORA that we included in it. So we explored some different options. We asked Colonial Williamsburg Securities team if they could staff it. We looked at possibly having our police department staff it with existing personnel. But for a number number of reasons, none of those options were viable. So after brainstorming and discussion, we began working with our police department to explore the possibility of adding being a DORA ambassador to the responsibilities of our parking ambassadors, who are part of the civilian labor force in the police department. So with that meant that funding was the challenge that we ran into because the police department did not have the funds at the time to move forward with hiring those DORA ambassadors. In May of 2023, City Council included in the approved FY24 budget additional funds for this very purpose, for the police department to hire on additional parking ambassadors who could serve as DORA ambassadors as well. So with that, the formal development of our Williamsburg DORA safety plan commenced. Lieutenant Ben Smith with the police department was really instrumental in helping create that safety plan and meeting with the businesses to make sure that they were comfortable with it as well. So the hours of operation for the DORA that we are proposing are Monday to Sunday, noon to 9. Hours are subject to change at the discretion of the police chief and the city manager. Basic rules of the DORA include things such as alcohol must be consumed or can only be consumed by those 21 and older. Beverages must be purchased from a permanent on-premise licensee located within the designated area, and no outside alcohol is permitted. The beverage must be placed by the on-premise licensee into an approved container, which has to be clear and no more than 16 ounces. The container must have the Williamsburg DORA logo on it, as well as the logo of the on-premise licensee that sold the beverage. Beverages that are purchased from one on-premise licensee cannot be taken into the establishment of another on-premise licensee. Here you'll see the proposed boundaries of the designated outdoor refreshment area for Merchant Square. It covers the first block of Merchant Square, the entire 400 block of Duke of Gloucester Street. The green stars shown on the map note the location of signage as required by our safety plan, informing patrons that they can't take their alcohol outside of the designated area. Here you'll see our Williamsburg DORA logo, as well as an example of the signs to be placed at each of the pedestrian egress points. That circle sign you see on the right will be made of the same material as the busking stations in Merchant Square and will be adhered to the brick ground. There will also be additional signage posted at eye level where appropriate. Also, as required by the safety plan, each business located within the DORA will be supplied with signage, noting whether or not they are a participating location. These colors were all chosen from the approved Colonial Williamsburg color palette. So the 5 on-premise licensees that intend to participate in the DORA and sell alcohol will be provided with a gold sold here sign. Retailers that want to allow their customers to come in and shop while consuming a beverage will be supplied with the green permitted sign. And then the 5 retailers downtown that do not want to allow beverages in store will be provided with the red not permitted sign. There are 25 businesses located within the DORA. 5 of them will be selling the alcohol. 15 will allow the alcohol in store, and 5 will not. It should also be noted here that Merchant Square conducted a vote to allow their membership to determine whether the entire group wanted the DORA to take place. The vast majority of the businesses voted in favor of it. Lieutenant Smith and I did go and meet with many of the businesses that were concerned, but we were able to address the concerns related to how it was going to impact their business and some safety concerns they had as well with the safety plan that we have in place. Should City Council pass the ordinance before you today, the city's responsibilities will include ordering and placing signage at all pedestrian egress points as noted on the earlier map, and will also be responsible for applying for the required ABC license and keeping the DORA staffed with ambassadors. The ultimate decision to approve or deny any request by any locality to create a DORA lies with the ABC board. So if they approve the license requested by the City of Williamsburg, they will provide detailed training to each of the 5 on-premise licensees on the rules of the DORA. Each of those on-premise licensees will be responsible for ordering and maintaining their own supply of the approved containers that show both the DORA logo and the logo of their business. Each licensee will also be responsible for informing patrons of the rules of the DORA and ensuring that their signage is properly on display. Should City Council adopt this proposed ordinance, staff will apply for the DORA license through the ABC board. According to the board, it can take 30 to 90 days for the approval to occur. And it's important to note that the ordinance before you today will only take effect if ABC approves the license. If approval is received, we will then move forward with ordering signage, and we will authorize the on-premise licensees to move forward with ordering their cups. Those are right now looking like they're on about a 6-week turnaround. And just wanted to also note that this is a 1-year pilot program. It's going to give us an opportunity to see how our visitors, how our residents, how our students interact with the DORA, how it's utilized, whether there are any issues with behavior or with the police department. It should also be noted the ambassadors, while they're not uniformed police officers, will have a direct line to the police department. So if there is ever an issue, they have that direct line of communication. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. So with this program, all the laws that need to be enforced in terms of selling alcohol still have to apply. I mean, so if somebody goes into a restaurant and buys a beer and goes out into the designated area, I guess I'm thinking some people have said, oh, people will get out of hand, but they're not going to be able to go back into the restaurant and continue to buy beer because it's illegal to overserve folks, right?
Correct.
And then the same laws that say, if I go and buy the beer as a legal-aged person and give it to an underage, I mean, that's still illegal.
Correct.
Right, and that's what part of the DORA ambassador will be looking for in that type of behavior. Okay. Well, I think this is a great opportunity when you look at just what's happened in the downtown area with the placement of the tables and the chairs and just seeing people dine and recreate in that area. This is just another added enhancement to the program, and I'm glad that the Merchant Square Association and the businesses have supported this, and thank you for all your work on this. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Yuri. Yeah, I'd say thanks for all your work on this. This is something that we've heard from the community for a number of years, and that's how it ended up in our GIO process and a GIO initiative for this council. And I know nothing can be foolproof, but the safety plan and all the restrictions that apply through ABC are there, and I'm glad to hear there's a pilot program. If it work, hopefully it works, because again, we've heard this request from the community. If it doesn't, then we take a step back and look at what else we can do. But I think it's a great opportunity to give it a try and see how it goes.
Chair.
Hi, thank you. I thought it was really funny when you showed the map of the DORA area. Dog Street didn't have any tables or chairs on it, and I was like, what are we looking at? But I think but I have a point there in the sense that being able, what I see here is that folks can get a drink and then take it out sit down at a table on Dog Street and have that drink, whereas currently, if you're outside of the little area right up against the storefront, you aren't actually supposed to, you can't do that. So I think just to sort of put a different visual on this than, rowdy crowds with beer, which I don't think we would see, but really just the ability to enjoy your drink out on a table on Dog Street.
Correct.
And if something does, if this doesn't go in the direction that we want, given that it's a 1-year pilot program, kind of to the point, we have that time the opportunity to say, well, it's not what we envisioned, and perhaps we need to change some things or forget it altogether. So I appreciate that it is that with the restrictions and the composition of our Merchant Square area right now, may come together really nicely to have an enhancement to the community, but with our ability to take a step back and undo it if it doesn't work after a year. And so I know this has been a lot of work for many people with you and your staff and the police department. So I appreciate that, and don't really have any questions, but also to confirm that the restaurants also that are participating, you say there are 5 that are participating, at any time they can say, actually, no, we've changed our minds and we don't want to do this either. So I think that the fact that this is really just volunteer for businesses that think that this is a good idea for them, I say that it's worth exploring and giving it a shot. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We talked about it yesterday at the EDA meeting, and it's been a topic of discussion in that group for quite a while, so I don't have anything to add to what's already been said. Thanks.
Director Matsumoto, thank you for this presentation. I get a couple comments, maybe two quick questions, though. I might have misunderstood. It sounded like it was not allowed to have a beverage purchased somewhere, brought into another business, and then I saw the signage that said sold here, not permitted, permitted. So is that distinction, if I am Talbot's, I can have, and I'm permitted, I can have a beverage bought somewhere else, brought into mine, but you can't do that at two different alcohol serving?
Correct, and that's ABC law as it stands right now. So you aren't unable to bring an alcoholic beverage from another location into a place that also serves alcohol on site.
Okay, great. And then I think I counted all the green stars, which will have the signage around maintaining your alcoholic beverages within the approved area. It looks like all of those would be near trash cans, but I just wanted to recommend really that we make sure that each of those signs is right next to a trash can. That way people can just throw away an empty.
That's been a point of discussion with Merchant Square. They're aware.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, I'll just add on to, I'm glad that council is willing to try this. It was May of last year that it was added into the budget after potentially being pushed off another year. It's been of interest to the community and of local vendors, so thanks to your office and also thanks to the department for logistically determining how to best work this into Williamsburg. So I'll be excited to see the pilot project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council approve proposed ordinance 24-06, which will create a designated outdoor refreshment area in Merchant Square and request an increase of frequency and duration of the ABC license pursuant to Section 4.1-206.3 of the Code of Virginia, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents to apply on behalf of the city to the ABC Board for a DORA license.
Second.
That says it all.
Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Okay, takes us now to item F, which is consideration and action on the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund request for an economic feasibility study from the advocates of the live performance venue. Ms. Scribrala.
Yes.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of City Council. I am here to present an application for the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund, as well as make a staff recommendation. Let's see. Before I get into the application itself, I just wanted to provide a quick overview and refresher of the program itself. It was adopted in 2015. This funding program was created in an effort to increase overnight visitation to the city by providing funds for the launch of new programs or activities, or providing funding to expand or enhance existing projects and activities. It was not designed to provide year-over-year support. You'll see a list of past awards here on the slide before you, including events and conferences, with the most recent being the 16th Oxford Conference, which was awarded in FY23. The FY24 budget for the TPCF is $150,000, and none has been spent this year. I will note that unused funds do go back into the tourism fund balance. So this brings us to today's request. This application is from the advocates for the live performance venue, or the ALPV. The application includes three components: an economic feasibility study from the Victus Group, a campaign planning study to help strategize funding with a quote from the Curtis Group, and to develop a website that could also have fundraising capabilities. The ALPV is a grassroots organization consisting of leaders from the performing arts community, many of which are actually here today, all advocating for a live performance venue in the city. This includes involvement from the Williamsburg Symphony Orchestra, Opera in Williamsburg, Ampersand International Arts Festival, the Williamsburg Choral Guild, Virginia Regional Ballet, Virginia Symphony Orchestra, Williamsburg Players, Virginia Arts Festival, and the Williamsburg Youth Orchestra. If funded, the ALPV will use the findings in the study to promote the need for and the viability of a live performance venue in the city of Williamsburg. The main goal of the ALPV is to secure that performance venue in the city. The ALPV's funding request is $89,970 for the economic feasibility study, $42,000 for the campaign study, and $12,000 for the website development, totaling $143,970. A staff committee met to review the application and determine a recommendation for you today. Staff recommends funding the feasibility study at the $89,970 as it does align with the mission of the TPCF. Staff does not see the website development as an eligible expense under this program and therefore does not recommend funding for that. As for the third component, the campaign study is a sound idea and would fall in line with the program. However, there is a desire for the city to do more broad development within the city, not limiting to the LPV project. That being said, the city recommends City Council make $42,000 available to city staff to hire a development specialist that could work on fundraising projects for the city, including but not limited to the LPV project. And this position could definitely work alongside or with the ALPV as well. Representatives from the ALPV are here, including I believe their newly elected chair, Robin Bledsoe, should you have any additional questions for them as well. And with that.
Well, thank you. So, Ms. Scorbala, I appreciate you working with the ALPV and certainly the creation of the ALPV. I think it's essential to this process, and the application, as I understand it, to really address the economic impact of the center is an important step in this process as we consider, along with the HTRFA, this concept of having a sports or a live performance venue located on the visitor center site. We have to understand if it's feasible, and so I think this is absolutely appropriate. And as you point out, using funds that have been set aside from the Tourism Development Grant Program makes perfect sense, because as you mentioned, this fund was created to support initiatives that would generate overnight visitation and thus meals tax as well, which obviously goes to support our economy. So I support this, and thank you very much, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you for the presentation. Making some comments of what the mayor stated is, and earlier there were comments made that this is part of a bigger project. And I think all of City Council has said in the past that they're excited for the opportunity to have a live performance venue as part of the sports complex. Obviously, before we make a commitment like that, we need to understand the economic feasibility. So I think it's appropriate that we do that now so that we have that information to make decisions moving forward.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I do echo the support for this in the sense that using these funds for this purpose, it really is an alignment of where we are in our thinking and the purpose, as you say, of this fund themselves for the feasibility study. And I also, kind of pulling back through the thread of this being part of larger vision, I also think that's why it does make sense to have the funds for the development specialist to not be limited necessarily to this project, although of course this project will be probably top of mind and absolutely should be, but I think there is value in having a development specialist that is also aware of other harmonies that may, no pun intended, that might come together if somebody is thinking not just of how do we provide for the development and the funding of one project, may really have it's good to have an eye on more than one thing, at a time. And so I think it makes sense, as recommended, to have this be under the city staff and have a broader portfolio for that role, but really launching and really getting started with this particular project. So thank you.
And I would just like to echo my thanks, Joanna, for the work you've done in pulling this together and presenting it to us. And I agree with all of the comments that have been said. And I understand that a feasibility study is sort of the next step, that we did that for the sports center, and if there were any other big major projects that would come before City Council, that we would need this study before we could go forward. So I'm glad that we can get started on that. As far as the development specialist, we talked about that as the need for the city a couple months ago, and when we were discussing for the budget, so I'm glad that this money would be available. And I know that obviously the ALPV put some research into their application of a development specialist, so I'm hopeful that some of that information can be utilized for us to sort of speed up the process of getting someone contracted, because the sooner we can find out where money might be available, the sooner we can start applying for it.
Absolutely.
So I'm in support of the recommendation.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Garbala. Maybe I'll start with the grants coordinator and just say I'm completely in favor of that. One of the boards I get to serve on council's Old Town Medical Dental Center. They have someone similarly in that position, part-time, that has unlocked several different facets of funding for them. And just from what we've heard of today, I think of the Heritage Trail and several projects that the city is looking at that we potentially could tap into other public monies for. And then on the economic development, or I should say economic feasibility study, certainly excited to see that. I know we've had a significant one put out for the sports complex, but I do also want to commend the ALPV on doing some initial research, and also just for being a citizen body so excited about this project and willing to bring several people into the meeting. So thank you all for your interest, and I'm excited to also support an effort to see what benefit the LPV could provide locally, and certainly have the grants coordinator who could try to find additional money to support that and other projects.
Thank you. Any other comments? Somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council award $89,970 from the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund to the Advocates for a Live Performance Venue for an economic feasibility study, and make $42,000 available to city staff for the purpose of engaging a development specialist to work on fundraising for public project development to include the live performance venue.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Okay. Takes us to item G. Mr. Vice Mayor, I believe we have some appointments to make.
We do.
Just a few.
Before I make motion for appointments and reappointments, just want to say thank you to everyone that applied for boards and commissions or agreed to be reappointed. In the past, it's not often that we have enough people to fill slots, and fortunately this time we had enough people for several positions that we conducted interviews, so it's exciting that we have people in the community that still want to get involved. And then I'll ask your patience because this is a long list. I move to appoint Chris Harrison and Joseph Singley to the Board of Building Code Appeals for 5-year terms effective immediately and ending December 31, 2028. Reappoint Sharon Baker to the Board of Equalization for a 3-year term effective July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2027. Appoint David Hankinson and Lori Heflin to the Community Action Agency Board of Directors for 5-year terms effective July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2029. Appoint Toran Chandrusekar to the Colonial Behavioral Health Board of Directors for a 3-year term effective July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2027. Reappoint Holly B. Smith to the Colonial Community Criminal Justice Board for a 3-year term effective July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2027. Reappoint Thomas Maynard to the Colonial Juvenile Services Commission for a 4-year term effective July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2028. Reappoint Andrew Crawford and Harold Phillipson to the Economic Development Authority for 4-year terms effective July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2028. Appoint Odessa Dowdy to the Economic Development Authority to fill an unexpired term effective immediately and ending June 30, 2026. Appoint Keith Johnson, Ralph Youngs, and Robin Peffley to the Farmers Market Advisory Board for 4-year terms effective July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2028. Reappoint Curtis Williamson and Robert Taylor to the Finance and Audit Committee for 2-year terms effective July 1, 2024, and ending June 30, 2026. Reappoint Lieutenant Timothy Walker to the Peninsula Alcohol Safety Action Program for a 3-year term effective July 1, 2024, and ending June 30, 2027. Appoint Erica Bowe to the Planning Commission to fill an unexpired term effective immediately and ending December 31, 2025. Appoint Mike Doucette to the Quarter Path Community Development Authority for a 4-year term effective August 1, 2024, and ending July 31st, 2028. Appoint Michael Bennett and reappoint John Morgan, Desiree Lawson, and Matthew Swinson to the Social Services Advisory Board for 4-year terms effective July 1, 2024, and ending June 30, 2028. Reappoint Jack Reed and Andrew Trivett to the Virginia Peninsula Public Service Authority for 2-year terms effective July 1, 2024, and ending June 30, 2026. Reappoint Barbara Vollmer to the Williamsburg Area Arts Commission for a 3-year term effective July 1, 2024, and ending June 30, 2027. Reappoint Rachel Trichler to the Williamsburg Public Art Council for a 2-year term effective July 1, 2024, and ending June 30, 2026. Appoint Sam Sadler to the Williamsburg Regional Library Board of Trustees for a 4-year term effective July 1, 2024, and ending June 30, 2028.
Good. Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. As Vice Mayor, so that's a motion. Is there a second? I thought you were just running on.
Please second.
Can you restate that motion? Okay, so I think you have a second. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey? Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, so as Vice Mayor said, thank you to all those that did apply and certainly those that are willing to serve. It says a lot about our community when we have folks that are willing to do that, and so we're better for it. Okay, so we do have one more item for closed session, Mr. Vice Mayor.
I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds, including interviews of bidders or offers and discussion of terms or scope of such contract, where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body per subparagraph 29 regarding schools.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll go into closed session, and once we come back out, we'll reconvene and be back in open session. So, thank you. Back in open session.
I move to approve the certification of a closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3712 in the Code of Virginia.
Okay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
You adjourn.